welcome. As the podcast channel goes live, it always goes live first before everything else in all the social media aspect. Welcome to Bridges Live Presents. And I have two incredible women on. You can always catch the recording later if you have any problems or questions. Contact me, but you can get it on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and get it on YouTube, Facebook, blah, blah, blah. That is not the real deal. Our thing is about information, education, and turning everything into an action. That has always been my mission statement. That has always been a statement that it doesn't matter what show I ever do. It's always about informing people, but letting people to have a fully understanding of what's going on. And I think people have what you call education, but they don't do anything with it. So to me, it's useless. And if you don't do anything with the things you learn about, then, well, it seems kind of harmful. And meanwhile, it means harmful because we can't say that you didn't know because we just told you. We can't say you didn't understand because we cleared it up for you. So please, my guest, introduce yourself. Lynn, you first.
Okay, great. Well, Dr. Dyer, thank you so much for having me on the show this evening. And my name is Lyn Twyman. I'm the CEO of LASERS, which stands for Leaving Abuse, Supporting Everyone, Restoring Survivors. And our motto is targeting domestic violence holistically. So what is LASERS? LASERS is a domestic violence prevention education program and model. And we support both female and male victims of domestic abuse. And we also believe in the importance of ensuring that abusers get the help and support that they need as well. And a part of what we tie into the programming is not only an understanding of domestic abuse and how it happens, how it occurs, but also how to prevent it. And then also strategies by which to deal with it, and also safety planning as well. And so this program is open to, again, males and females, younger people, older people. And we've also done trainings for clergy members, hundreds of clergy members, law enforcement agents, along with diversion workers as well. So thank you for having me on the show.
You're welcome. And we're going to make this a continuous thing because we always know that one show never does it for people. I think people need to be constantly hearing the drum beat and knowing that the rhythm's out there, knowing that they can be confident and say, I know where to go to get help. Tamara, please, my girl, voices to be heard. Welcome back. She's always rocking that beautiful hat.
Thank you.
Give us an update. Tell us about She's Kept and all the things you've been doing, please.
Absolutely. I'm Tamara Randolph, founder and owner of Kept. Kept stands for Keeping Every Possibility Tangible. And I created Kept in loving memory of my mom, who was unfortunately killed by her husband about 26 years ago. And I created Kept because I wanted to make sure there was an organization where women could go for a safe haven. They could find strength and just discover themselves. And so we're able to, with the help of our community, provide that resource for women. And it's a pleasure always to be able to not only share my story, but just to encourage other women and families that they can get out of those toxic situations and be able to live their complete full life. So again, a pleasure to join you, Dr. Paul.
I want to, before, as people watch this, either on whatever social media you have that's out there, or when you see it again, people are going to wonder, what's this behind me? And so I'll explain that right away, and we'll get into the program. Just recently, I was at a museum in Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama, the Legacy Museum. It's a museum that talks about from enslavement to incarceration, about the history of America. We can't just say it's Black America, because it's all of our history, because it has affected us all. But it has all these very much depictions. This is one of the pictures that was outside one of the parks. And inside the museum, it's the heaviest museum I've ever been to in my whole life. I've been to Holocaust Museum, and maybe because the Holocaust Museum wasn't as heavy, or the different sites I've been to, because as much as I love life and I understand and I have had associations with death, it just wasn't me, maybe. And because I felt that way after I really went through this museum and see faces that look like me, who was abused like me, who was enslaved like me, who was tortured like me, it really grabbed me and a lava twisted. It made my body hurt as I was walking through it. It was the most painful museum, like I said, I've ever had the pleasure of going through. It's not because I enjoy pain, but to understand. We know the stories, we hear about it, we read the books, if you read the books, if you dug in deep. But this was all around it. It was so impactful. And so this is to let people know when I do certain shows, when I do a lot of shows, that we cannot forget the things that has happened, because it continuously happening every day with past, future, and present. And this is almost like a perfect show to talk about domestic and abuse and enslavement, because that's what it is, whether it be mentally, emotionally, or physically. When someone's trying to take away your joy, right? Take away your life, take away who you are trying to be, that's enslavement. And that's what domestic violence is. It's a form of enslavement to me. I'm not, this is not sugarcoating it, but I think that's how it feels. Tamara, tell me what you think about that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a perspective for sure. I think anytime you are unable to, like you mentioned, be yourself or make decisions as an adult, I think that is a form of enslavement, you could say. I think oftentimes, people look at abuse, and it's easy to associate abuse with the physical abuse. Like, I can actually see scars, I can see bruises, but mentally, that's one that's hard to express a lot of times. Emotionally, that's hard to express when someone is just taking away your freedom to speak, your freedom to be happy. So I agree with your perspective there as well.
Hey, Lynn, one of the things that, along with your program and the things you have been doing in this time, is that people don't get to tell their story. I know Tamara and we found that out, that people's stories, when it comes to domestic and violence in a home, people just don't tell the story. Have you figured out a better way where people could just be like outwardly spoken and say, I need help and here's my story?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I found out in my journey is sometimes you just have to go out there and with boldness do it. Not to sound cliche-ish, but it's like that Nike slogan, just do it. And I have found that in my courage to do just that. Now, it's not to say that it hasn't been scary, that it hasn't been frightening, that it hasn't brought up trauma from the past, that I haven't been triggered. But over the years, with understanding more about who I am, combined with training, combined with therapy, I've been able to actually just come out there, and every time I tell my story, it gets better and better, meaning it becomes easier and easier. And I'm able to pull out lessons from my journey to help others. So not in an effort to stay stuck in the past, but in an effort to help others move forward, which in turn helps me to move forward too. And one of the things that I have also found too in my program is giving people that safe space. And a lot of times women have safe spaces, but oftentimes men don't have safe spaces to talk about how they've been victimized, especially starting from childhood. When we talk about sexual abuse, for example, that's something that is so extremely shameful for so many people. And to make it a common conversation, to say, you know what, it's happened to more of us than we want to believe or realize. And sexual abuse is a part of domestic abuse. So a lot of times, the old way of thinking was domestic abuse is just physical violence, but it always starts with that mental and emotional abuse first, and then it escalates into the physical form, whether it is hitting, punching, kicking, stabbing, shooting, or sexual abuse. And so twofold is individuals like myself, like Tamara, who are both survivors of domestic abuse, going out there and boldly proclaiming that, yes, this happened to us. This is what we're doing about it. And this is what we, hope that you can learn from our stories and from our lessons and what we're doing now. And then providing safe spaces for any segment of society or community to be able to talk about it.
Before I let you go, Tamara, and Lynn, you didn't know because we recently met and things we're doing and some other work we're doing. But Tamara knows the story. I was sexually molested as a young boy. And we've talked about it on our show, Voices to Be Heard, about how it isn't a safe place for a lot of men to talk about it. And even then, being in the military and then going through, I would say, healing from post-traumatic stress disorder. And then that's how I got really into understanding the back science of emotional science and emotional release and healing the trauma, because I too had to go through the work and still put in the work and still put in the practice and still put in the training, because it's a constant and consistently for us to live a complete, not survive, because there's a difference. Go ahead, Tamara, what were you going to say?
No, you're actually saying a lot of what I wanted to say as well. And Lynn mentioned it, just saying that it's a process for both of us. I think, Lynn, you mentioned being in therapy and getting through some things, especially because me witnessing my mother's death, I was at the age of 10. That was the age of 10. And it wasn't until I became an adult where I figured out therapy and talking this through is what I need in order for not only myself to heal, but for me to be a better friend, a better aunt, a better sister, and that's a continual process. And I hope that this show is a way for people to understand it's not going to be an overnight fix, but it's going to be a part of a journey, of your complete journey, your complete story. And, if my purpose is just to impact and encourage one person, I feel like then my journey is all worth it. And so that's really, I just wanted to talk about that journey and understand that it is a process, whether you are physically, emotionally, or however you are abused. It is a process, but the steps, you got to make the step to get the help to get out of those situations, because there are a number of resources I know now compared to when my mom was being physically abused, that is tangible for us to get access to. So it's a blessing that we do have those resources, and we just need to make sure that people know that they're out there, and it's nothing to be afraid about. And again, Lynn, as you mentioned, just to continue to have that conversation to make it more comfortable, or at least a little ease to say, she's going through it. She looks just like me.
Right.
So I feel more comfortable with, even if it's just, if I can just share my story with her or reach out to her for help, I feel more comfortable because I know that it's someone that looks like me and is going through or has gone through something similarly, and I'm praying that they can help. So I love that part of my journey and being able to share my story.
Lynn, do you want to tell your story? It's up to you. It's your choice, but would you like to tell your story? Again, we know that the story it's our testimonial. I know a lot of men, after I do, when people have seen or heard me speak, and they say, "Wow, Doc, you're pretty open about that." I say, if I'm not open, they would kill me. Mm-hmm. And I want to live this world. I don't want people to suffer through silence. We have so many people suffering through silence, whether it be human trafficking, whether it be domestic. There's a lot of silence going on, and we have to stop. We have to break that silence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's the saying that goes, silence is violence. And that's the truth. Mm-hmm. I mean, speaking up and then not speaking up is what is killing people, literally, from the inside out. And so I actually enjoy telling my story now. It used to be a time when I couldn't get through my story without snotting and crying and boo-hooing and, I think at the end of the talk, the only thing people really could understand was my name, and that was it. But I got over that. And I can tell my story now even by throwing in every once in a while a few jokes. Because at the end of the day, this is a very heavy topic for a lot of people, especially if they haven't been through the healing process. But so to get into it, I did grow up in a home with abuse. My father was mentally abusive to my mother and I'm the only child of my parents. And understanding, however, where that abusive behavior came from my father, he was the primary abuser. And then the secondary abuser in the home was my mother. And then when tracing back the family history on both sides, come to find out both of them have been abused by their parents to some degree. My father, he experienced more physical abuse, emotional and mental abuse, along with verbal. And my mother faced more emotional and verbal abuse. So there you had two unhealed people, individuals that hadn't dealt with their trauma, hadn't been to any counseling, therapy, nothing, coming together, getting married, and then 3 years later having me. And so at the end of the day, the marriage didn't solve the problems. Me coming into the picture certainly didn't solve the problems because that added more responsibility on both of them. And unfortunately, I inherited their emotional and I want to even say spiritual, lack of spiritual health. And so this thing called domestic abuse went on throughout my childhood. And it just kept repeating itself in some shape, form, or fashion, mostly mental and verbal abuse. Just to give you some examples, I mean, I was called names like whore by both of my parents. I was told that if I didn't do certain things, that I would be disowned. And I'm hearing all these things before the age of 10. I'm seeing my father threaten to have my mother deported because my mother's an immigrant. So he would say things like that. So I grew up fearing that my mother was going to be just taken away if she didn't do what, my father wanted her to do.
Right.
And there was a lot of threats that came from her as well. I saw dishes broken, multitude of times, hollering and screaming late at night. There was a time when I actually walked out of the home at about 11 o'clock in the evening. I was about 7 years old. I packed all the things that a 7-year-old would value at the time, right? Teddy bear, some books, and I think a granola bar. Okay. And I left the house, 11 o'clock at night, walking down the street with some flip-flops on, because I wanted to get away from the abuse. I wanted to get away from the fighting. I wanted to get away from the arguing. I just wanted peace. And so...
I don't want to interrupt you, but there's so many kids that are going through the same thing today, yesterday, and again, and they just want to get away, and there's no flares for them to shoot up. And I know, Tamara, you had said there's a lot of help out here, but you think about a 7-year-old, a 9-year-old, I don't know if the neighborhood I grew up with, I'm connecting as that I could get help.
Yeah, mm-hmm. I think that is more of the problem. Like the resources there, but how do we make that connection? Is something that we on that's actively trying to bring those resources to families. We got to figure out how we can infiltrate.
Right. Well, and again, silence is violence, right? So a lot of times domestic abuse is that family secret. Nobody wants to talk about it. And the children are threatened not to talk about it as well. And I totally agree. And that's why these kinds of conversations and making them just as public and as profound as talking about protecting yourself from STDs. I mean, when we're, our young people are learning about safe sex, in elementary school. Mm-hmm. Before they're being taught about healthy relationships and how to deal with trauma. And that's crazy.
That's crazy. I don't understand how we get from
absolutely insane.
Sex without understanding a healthy relationship. And we never talk about have a healthy relationship with yourself.
Right.
Like, so how do we go from, keep going. I actually think the way it's being done keeps perpetuating the abuse, because it must not be something important because it never gets talked about. So, without saying it's not important because you don't talk about it, it must be unimportant. Because you talk about everything else. You talk about no running around a pool. You talk about, don't curse in a hallway. You talk about no cutting online, but you don't talk about this. Huh.
And you brought up a very good point. So it's that important that systematically the system doesn't want to talk about it.
Right.
Because unhealthy relationships, domestic abuse, contributes to so many other social factors, okay? Mass incarceration, for example, whether it's detention or imprisonment.
Right.
A majority of individuals are incarcerated as a result of domestic abuse, then substance misuse, okay? So crime pays. It pays salaries. It does a whole host of things. But anyhow, that's another topic for another day. So kind of fast forward, just to top off my story here. So I grew up in a home with abuse. And because I didn't see a proper example of my father, primarily, he was my male figure in my life. He had his good days and bad days, but he had mostly bad days than he had good days. And again, as a result of his historical trauma that wasn't dealt with, including the PTSD that he incurred from the military as well. So then fast forward, my first relationship ever, I didn't date before this, didn't even kiss a guy before this, okay, was with a guy who was not only mentally abusive, but he was physically abusive as well. And so there, I thought I could help him. I thought, oh my goodness, would rub off on him. And it didn't. And in fact, I found myself involved in a 3-year abusive relationship where, for the first time I had somebody put their hands on me, to the point that he almost took my life. And, to get caught up in that type of cycle, I tell people this all the time, that our parents didn't come with an instruction manual for life.
Right.
And they most certainly didn't teach us this instruction manual, most of us. So it's up to us now, knowing what we've been through, to create the instruction manual and make sure that the present day family, whatever family we belong to, community, and the future get a hold of this instruction manual. And that instruction manual is literally that relationship with yourself first, healing this, especially as melanin dominant people. If you're listening and you happen to be a Black person or melanin dominant individual, you got to heal this.
You have to, because we have so much trauma between segregation in America, right? Between Reconstruction in America, between the lynching in America, right? And between mass incarceration, from slavery to mass incarceration. So we have jobs. We have a job issue. Not because there's not enough jobs. We may not just be qualified. We may be qualified. We may not be able to get a job. So there's all these other things, and they can be really considered to be distractions when your internal self, is struggling with your own identity of being a human being. And then you want to have a relationship with another person. It's doomed for failure. Because we haven't gotten the help. We haven't said, I need help. Dr. Paul, hey, Dr. P, I need to talk to you. Great, because I'm not a magic show. I don't know you need help until you actually open your mouth. And then we during COVID, when it first hit, we know that everything increased. Alcohol abuse, family abuse, everything that could increased, right? And it just went off the charts. my question, Tamara, I'm thinking is, we're not going to be allowed to get this type of information in the schools. So how do we get to the kids if we don't stand on the street corner and stand on a soapbox? I don't know how we get to the kids.
Well, we have to, try and meet them where they are. So I think, pretty sure, I don't have children. I have godchildren, but social media, somewhere, they're always on their phones. So somehow we have to figure out how to help get that message through there. TikTok is very popular right now. And they will follow whatever that trend is. And even if it's, one person and then you get thousands of likes, it kind of goes that way. So thinking kind of creatively, how can I get the message I want to send, which is you don't have to be part of this abusive environment. And here's how you get help. How can I creatively make that appealing to a child that doesn't know, how else to get help? So that's the thing that kind of triggers and kind of comes off, kind of pops up in my head right now is we need to figure out how to meet them where they are, especially because, some kids are going back to school now, but there's still some that
or not,
unfortunately have fallen somewhere in between not being in school or staying at home to be, homeschooled or, visual learning. But how effective, has that last year been? And it's just more of a need for us to get out there and be proactive in reaching them.
Lynn, what are you thinking?
Yes, I totally agree. We have to use every tool available to us. And in addition to that, grassroots never fails. It never fails, especially when we're talking about our inner city youth, too. And there has to be more of us that are willing to go door to door, to knock on those doors, to organize events. And we can't be in a hurry to run to the finish line, so to speak.
Yes.
Even though there is a race. There's an absolute race when it comes to relationship education. And we have to be, I feel, more focused on those grassroots efforts. And if we get 10 youth, 10 families, over time that will magnify, it will multiply. And to have the faith and the endurance to do that. And, coming together, programs like mine and Tamaras and others, just coming together as volunteers, not worried about the money,
right?
Okay, because you can't put a price on somebody's life.
No. Even though there is.
Yeah, even though there is. But if my number one goal had been, I need to get paid for this, I would have stopped a long time ago. Long time ago.
Put a couple of G's on that long. Put a couple of G's and O's on that long.
Right.
Because it's always fascinating to me when people are like, you just do this because? I'm like, that's all I do is because. Because I don't want people to suffer. That this is the repetitive conversation. The suffer in silence is killing us. Whether it been my PTSD, I did not want to suffer in silence. I didn't want to die that way. I didn't want to suffer knowing that life is supposed to be beautiful. Life is beautiful. Living is beautiful, right? And so many of us have been surviving, whether it be in our neighborhood, our home, or wherever, in the job. And no, we're too prolific in this time of age to be quiet. I can't see it any other way. And then speaking of, we got to meet them where they are. I guess I have to stop tapping people on the shoulder and going, hey, can I talk to you? Because I do that a lot in airports, and I get funny looks going, what do you want? I'm like, I want to talk to you. And their words start triggering their life. When I just ask them, how are you? And they go, and the way they carry themselves there's something, right? And then I end up going, are you okay?
Yeah.
And they're not. So
True story.
People are just not okay on a daily basis. And I don't want to assume that everyone's not okay, but a lot of people, I guess the way I get drawn to a person, they're not okay. And they just need to, and I end up going, my wife's here, you want to talk to a woman? I mean, it was right here, you know what I mean? Because you're not alone. I just want to let people know that you're not alone and don't suffer in silence.
Absolutely. I think that's the important part. I'm sure you get a ton of crazy looks, especially now.
I do.
First of all, you're too close, but but that's important. I mean, honestly, we need that. And I think we've all mentioned how what we do is from our hearts. And it's not because, we're looking for any fame or any monetary gain. It's literally because we want to help people. We love the opportunity to tell our stories and to provide that resource. I can't imagine a number of people, Dr. Paul, you've helped and saved, because you started that conversation. And I try to make it a point, especially if someone says, like, how are you? And oftentimes it's kind of like a good, and you? It's just like an automatic, I'm going to throw that out there type of thing. So I really try to be intentional on answering, and especially I'm a visual learner, and I love watching scenes and, looking at people and trying to figure out stories or figure out my environment per se, because I may not necessarily go up and talk to every person. I don't mind talking to people, but especially if I see someone that, they need help. I've done, I don't recommend this, but I've done chases on the highway because I saw someone like being abused. And I'm like, first of all, I'm not sure if I'm gonna make it, but I know for sure this isn't going to continue to happen. So, I mean, that's my heart. And I thank God for the wherewithal to know that that's a part of my story. That's a part of my journey and my place here. And again, I think bringing us together and allowing our resources to, come together and spread. I think one of the guests here mentioned it, like combining resources. I think that's important because that makes our reach even larger.
Lynn, you said a great point of door knocking. I'm all for it. Really, it's just like canvassing anything for anything. We start out with one neighborhood, doesn't have to be, and just go. We blanket this neighborhood and capture names and capture people and then just keep it. Just I love that idea.
It works in politics. It works in sales. I mean, at the end of the day, people are spending a lot of time and energy, going door to door to get their candidates to win. They're putting mailers in the mailboxes, and so just having a different approach to these types of issues is extremely important. How you talked about, just reaching out to people. I ear hustle. So when I'm traveling, if I'm in the airport, for example, I'll overhear conversations. And every once in a while, I will literally go up to a young lady that I hear having some kind of conflict with her significant other. And this happened not too long ago. I let the young lady know, I was like, listen, you're worth more than that. You have a purpose. And I said, I don't mean to be in your business. However, I want to tell you that you do have a purpose. And that whole back and forth that you had with that person, that is so beneath you. You don't need to convince that person of your worth. And so it was, and she had a tear in her eye after I gave her those words of affirmation, right? And so just being grounded, staying humble, it is just so extremely important in this journey. But then giving people an opportunity to look at something too, realizing that, and this took me a while to understand. I didn't realize that when I do come into a room, people do notice me. So I was like, okay, how do I use that for the greater good? Okay. Instead of being like, why are you looking at me? No, look at me. because I have something to share with you.
Yeah, yeah.
And this information could very well be life-saving for you or somebody else. And, so that's the approach that I've taken in life now, because it is a calling, and too much is given, much is required.
Mm-hmm.
I know personally for me, I've been given extremely heavy load, but it's a heavy load that I am proud to bear.
But you're not going to bear this alone. I tell you that right now.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely.
No.
You got us two now. You got you're not doing this alone. No more. Even if you were doing it alone, you're not doing it anymore.
Right. No, not at all. And totally get that, totally feel that altogether. And what I mean by alone is,
I do.
Sometimes it does. It feels like an island, right? But I know there's so many wonderful people out there, including you, Doc, Tamara, Mr. Franklin, Renee, all the people that I see right now here on Zoom, and those listening live and in the future. And so that's what we have to do, is just continue to build that community. One of
the things we've noticed throughout the years, when you become an ear hustle, I'm stealing that right now. Because I total ear hustle. You
have to be an ear hustler. And that's it. And the mask makes it like, for some reason, I feel like I can hear a little better. Okay? Because, sometimes, and it helps, like, train my expressions. Because sometimes I'm like, I don't know, but I agree. I too am an ear hustler. Not sure where I learned it from, but very much so.
So if there's hostility from anyone, whether it be in a group, couple, or personally, if it's external hostility outwardly, they're in a bad spot. And what I mean by that is that most people you tend to not want to share anxiety or anger outwardly. And if a group or a couple is very bitter in public, their home life is nasty. If you know that the way the mother grabs the child in public, that child is probably being harmed in private. Because if they do it this way in public, and this is an airport, or this is a store, they're not doing too well at home. That's how I look at it. And I wish there was times I could follow these people home, because I could I knew it. You know what I mean? Because they're just the way young girls carry a doll. I remember the way this young girl was carrying this doll, and it just threw off so many red flags to me by how she had this doll up under her arm. She wasn't holding it like this. She had it up under her arm like it can never leave her. That wasn't a healthy hold in my mind. It wasn't like it was just dangling like a child. It was so embraced and tucked and under, like, I will keep you safe, because I felt that she was saying, because I'm not safe.
Yeah. And a lot of people they don't feel safe in their own bodies. Mm-mm. They don't feel safe in their environment, and they don't feel safe in their own bodies. And that goes back to the trauma, right? So understanding, why is it that when your partner says something, or your parent says something, or your child says something, that becomes a trigger for you? Mm-hmm. Sounds, smells, words, colors, the feel of fabric even, mm-hmm. songs, visuals on television, they can all be triggers for any one of us. And we don't even understand why we're feeling these sensations in our bodies, and until we get the training, however.
And I think I've been trying to bang the drum about, if you feel something, think something, or is curious, why wouldn't you search out the answer? We do that with food. You're like, I feel like pizza. And then we'll call up Domino, I don't know, but we'll call up a pizza place and order it. But when it comes to a sensation, like you said, sight, smells, and all those sensations, and they're uneasy, why wouldn't we call someone and say, I'm feeling this way, who could I talk to? I may not know, but let me find you someone. But go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah, mental health is still a taboo issue.
Yeah.
And I think for a couple of things, because a lot of times when you go to a mental health practitioner, they label you, right? For billing purposes, you have to be labeled in order to have the visit covered by insurance. So a lot of people go to private practices. Like I have a private practice that I do and offer to the community, for example, because people don't feel safe. They don't feel comfortable. So that's one aspect. They don't want to be labeled. Mm-hmm. Most trauma, or let me put it this way, most mental health issues can be directly attributed to some adverse childhood experience. And a lot of times that's typically rooted in some form of abuse or neglect. So that's one aspect. Nobody wants to be labeled. Yeah, some people can't afford the visit, but mostly they don't want to be labeled. So they don't want to have that shame, following them, especially on the job, right? Some positions require disclosures. And then the second part is, again, it's just this lack of education. We've made money, sex, and drugs so comfortable to talk about, ratchetness, reality TV, everything that's nonfiction, or fiction, I should say, everything that's fiction. But the things that are nonfiction, we want to escape from, and we're the greatest nonfiction stories ever.
Ever.
Everybody listening to this right now has a story, an amazing story that could be put on Lifetime or, on the big screen, Hollywood, and it would send chills down anybody's spine, watching. So we have to get to the point where we value ourselves enough to say, I love me enough that not only am I going to take the time to research what I'm going to eat, what I'm going to wear, where I'm going to vacation to, but let me invest and love myself enough to take care of this trauma, to take care of this uneasiness. I remember a couple of years ago, I was listening to this old school R&B song, right? And I just felt really, really sad listening to it. And it was not, a breakup song or anything. And then I was like, okay, my training kicked in, though. My trauma training kicked in. I was like, okay, the therapist has got to do therapy on herself now. What's going on here? And I remember thinking to myself that the last time I had heard this song was when I was about 10 years old, when my parents were breaking up. And so those emotions were still stored to the cellular neurological level of my body, literally. And I had to work to rewire so that the next time I heard the song, I would no longer feel those sensations and emotions anymore. And so giving people those kinds of tools, realistic tools to deal with it, to deal with the trauma, is so important. And that leads me to talk about, and then I'll wrap up my comments for right now, is that abusive behavior. Mm-hmm. We're addressing abusers, whether they're male or female.
Right.
They are being triggered to the degree that they are lashing out and projecting all of their fears, all of their anxieties on the other person that becomes the object of their control. And I tell people that when it comes to domestic abuse, it's not about love, it's about power and control. The abuser feels the need to gain some power and control over their own life because they feel like they have lost it. But that comes out in, let me control this other person because this other person isn't doing what I want them to do, when the abuser should be going inward and focusing on what is it that I need to do. Do I need to rewire my brain? Do I need to rewire, these residual emotions that are flowing through me? Do I need to deal with this trauma? What do I need to do?
That's the question. That's the healing question. That's how we heal as a person, as people, as a community, as a nation. We ask ourselves, what do I need to do? Tamara, you must have asked yourself that question once or twice before when you were younger. Like, what am I going to do or what am I need to do? Which one did you ask first? Do you remember?
I want to say it was a little of both. I think when I was younger, after my mom passed, I felt it was a hurry up and grow up type of thing. So I was 10 years old, and then a lot of my childhood per se, I don't quite remember, honestly. I felt like it was time for me to grow up. And a lot of the things kind of that happened, I went through, I don't remember a lot of them. And it wasn't until I started in therapy and we were talking about trying to make correlations to things that are happening in my life now. And my therapist will always try to say, well, let's talk about this more. Let's dig into why you feel that way or why you reacted or why you're accepting different things. Because the only thing I remember was I would never let a man or anyone physically or emotionally abuse me. That was the most important. So like raising your voice or me feeling like I was uneasy, right. Always a hard boundary for me, no matter how young I was. But now that I've grown and gone to therapy, I had to apply that to all of my relationships, not just my partners, my love interests per se, but family, friends. I had to make sure I set that boundary for myself, because no one else is going to say, oh yeah, Tamara, this is your boundary. Make sure you stay in it. Don't forget, make sure you set your boundary. It was on me to make sure I set that boundary, no matter how hard it is, because for years and years, I would just go with whatever, no matter how I was personally affected. I would not necessarily take out as much time for myself. I thought it was more important that I was pouring and helping everyone else, but that was also tearing me down. So not only just dealing with the day-to-day, just being a woman, being a Black woman in society, I had to figure out a way for me to deal with my trauma in the past so that I think I mentioned it before, but so that I could be a better person, not only to myself and loving myself, but to my friends and my family as well.
I know we're coming close up for an hour and we don't want to go too long. And the next show we're going to talk about some healing practices. But I want to talk just a smidgen about the neuroscience of it all, right? So when we go through trauma, it becomes stamped like a timestamp because of the trauma. And that, in fact, causes the memory. Whether it be good or bad, it creates the memory because of the trauma. There's trauma, there's good trauma, there's bad trauma, right? Birthday parties are traumatic. Oh my God, surprise, right? So the body doesn't recognize the difference between good or bad. It recognizes the adrenaline push. That is what the stamp is when it creates an adrenaline push from the internal system, right? In that system now puts markers like flares. So that's why if you smell something again or hear something again, it triggers that marker again, which creates that adrenaline, which sends the signal to the brain, which causes the reaction. Here's the fascinating part. You cannot heal anything negative until you release and open up the past harmful trauma. Like like the synapses in the brain will never refire a different way until you open this up and allow this to fire out, almost like burn out. But it would only burn out like a fire until you recognize it and literally open it up. Then you can retrain the synapses firing into a different triggering point and how you react to it. So that's why therapists go, we need to dig into this more, because if you don't dig into it, you won't release that fire. It'll just keep smoldering, and so it'll just keep triggering, which keeps igniting the fire to keep burning. We release it by opening yourselves up, really. And it has nothing to do with I don't understand it and I need to know the cause. Those are different. Opening yourselves up meaning to express. That's what opening yourselves up, because when you express, you fire that synapses, it opens up and you're just blah, right? It just comes out, right? And that's how you can start your healing process. I hope that helps with people when they hear this, because the only way you're going to really heal is to fully allow yourself to go through that pain and to allow yourself to immerse in it and allow it to open up. Before we take off, Lynn, you want to say anything about the program and how they can get a hold of you?
Yes, so I've really enjoyed this time with all of you. Thank you so much, Dr. Dyer and Tamara. Pleasure meeting you on the broadcast. And so my website is wearelasers.org, and that's spelled WEARELASERS.org. So www.wearelasers.org. And my contact information is there. You can also get a hold of me on IG at Lyn Twyman, LYN Twyman. And my program is very adaptable to any type of situation or scenario that you might have. So small groups, large groups. Of course, there's a one-on-one piece as well for therapy sessions. I've, again, trained law enforcement officers, diversion workers, spoken at corporations, and I've spoken to very, very small groups. It doesn't matter the size. I am there available to help assist and really give people the ins and outs of what domestic abuse looks like and how they can heal from it. And then also the safety planning. If you find yourself in a relationship with abuse and you know you got that gut feeling, I have got to get out, or you have had your friends or families members telling you that you need to get out, then I can also help you with that safety planning as well. Don't wait.
That's great.
Don't wait. Don't wait.
Tamara, please tell us about She Kept.
Yes, you can visit www.shekept.org, and that's SHEKEPT.org. My contact info there is there as well. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram, and feel free to, at any moment, I'm normally up most of the evening for whatever reason, but if you need help, you want to shoot me a message, please feel free to do so. I am here to help. I would love to. And Lynn, I can't wait for us to work together.
Well, I'm going to tell you, you guys are going to both come to my boxing class one early morning, and let's get that kicking so we can get, if we can fight with our physical, we can fight it all the way. I'm inviting you both out to
the early morning part.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a morning person either, but
I can do about 10. I can stretch 9. But I know you are like 5 a.m.
I am. But I can. Come on. Start the day off right and get it going, get it hopping.
I'll try it. I'll give it a try.
Yeah, see?
As soon as Lynn confirms the day and time, I'll be there.
I'm gonna put us in a group text. I'm gonna hammer it home. Thank everyone for listening. If you have any questions for Lynn or Tamara, please contact us. Contact the show. I'll make sure they get it. If you want to know, we're going to talk about healing process and the process on our next show. So everyone, please be kind, be safe, be compassionate, and learn how to express yourself, please. You're not alone. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and we will catch you up later. You ladies, hold on.